Hey, hello, and welcome to the Feel Strong Fitness Podcast. My name is Justin McClintock, and this week we have David Amerland on the podcast, author of Built to Last: How to Get Stronger, Happier, and Healthier at Every Stage of Life. David, welcome to the podcast.
Justin, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
I am too. I wanted to tell you up front, I imagine many podcast hosts get sent all kinds of things from all kinds of guests. Many people send me their books or their book pitches or something like that. And 95% of them, I read the first three sentences and delete the email because the world is full of, and the fitness world is full of grifters and people who just want me to reprogram my gut hormone, or a lot of people seem to want to be taking advantage of people. And you come across as exactly the opposite. As, first of all,
I
an
tried.
interesting
Thank you.
person. Well, of course, it's true. A prolific author and someone who seems genuinely passionate about this subject of fitness and helping people kind of unlock the likelihood within themselves to be successful at these things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And this is the connective thread in pretty much everything I do. I mean, I've written books on business and search, decision making and intentionality. And they seem on the surface to be all different, but they're connected by us. Our behavior drives the reasons we don't do things we should, and the reasons why we do things which we shouldn't, which always fascinate me.
Yeah, that was actually the first thing I was going to ask. I know you have a background in chemical engineering. You've
That's
written
right.
books on this super deep dive into search and SEO, high pressure level decision making around the sniper's mind. And now I saw the book about fitness. And again, for a moment, I was like, oh, well, this is someone's writing about everything. You've done a ton of work on this and are obviously very passionate about martial arts and fitness. So why spend obviously an enormous amount of time producing a fitness book?
Yeah, see, that's an interesting question. This was never my intention. Fitness is something I've always done for me. It's my safe space. I've had a lot of pressure pretty much all my life, different types of pressure, but it's always been there. And my go-to place to decompress, to find myself, has always been exercise. I've been doing martial arts since I was 13. I'm 60 now, so it's a 47-year journey. And I've got 3 different black belts in 3 different martial arts styles. I competed in an elite level for 10 years. So I never really intended to do anything to do with fitness. And people always used to ask me, can you help me get fitter? I would say no, not because I didn't want to help, but because it is a fiendishly difficult task to do. Somebody's asking you to tell them what to do, and they're different from you, and what works for you will not work for them. And not only that, but my own motivation for training is entirely different to theirs. My emotionality and my pressure valve approach, where I basically channel all my sort of stress and all my inner demons into the physicality of something which I do to help me deal with that, is not why they would do those things. So I was the last person to actually tell them what to do. And in writing Built to Last, it's sort of a journey of years where people ask me in a business environment, how can we be healthier? Because then we make better decisions. How can we be calmer? Because then we deal with the stress we feel in a business environment better. And I would say go and exercise, but I wouldn't tell them what to do. This book sort of came out of the last 3. I looked at decision making, and as you mentioned, I looked at snipers, and I interviewed 100 of them. And then I looked at neuroscience behind that, and it's a sizable body. And at the time it was groundbreaking, because we're able to see how a sniper's trained mind dealt with pressure in order to reach a critical decision at a very critical time in their sort of working life, and make the right decision, the right choice. A lot of the stuff came down to physicality. It came not to being strong, but to being trained, training your body, which then trains your mind, because there are few redundancies in the human body. If we train our body to do something, essentially we're also training our brain to guide the body into that something. So we're building integrated circuitry, which has ramifications in pretty much everything we do, and certainly in everything we feel. So from all that complexity, at some point, I decided that the next step really had to be to put this into simple words so somebody can understand it, not as a prescription, but as a guide. If you sort of understand your operating system yourself, then you're better positioned to understand why you don't exercise when you should, Why do you eat the wrong foods when you should? Why don't you get enough sleep when everybody understands the need for that? So it's basically a blueprint on how we operate. And my hope is really that the people who read it understand it well enough to then go and actually become better in themselves. And better
That's
people
what
make a better world.
exactly. That's how we make the world better, right? And
Yes,
this
absolutely.
resonates very deeply for me as someone. This Feel Strong came out of running, observing something you just said, that lots of people aren't getting the exact thing they need because they're a completely unique person. Even where they are now is what they did 20 years ago. That is not the thing that's going to work for them now because their life and stress and schedule and needs and goals and injury history and all of that is completely different. So we try and take everything from that biopsychosocial model of looking at the entire person. And that's another thing that really jumped out is this is not a conventional fitness book. This is not do these 10 steps, eat these 10 foods, avoid the whatever nonsense people are spewing, and you'll get there. It seems to me sort of a way to engineer the likelihood of success for individual people and helping them kind of craft the mindset and understand not that they should be motivated, but where motivation may come from and how you can start building it.
Yes, absolutely. And and I'm glad you said that. We often use words like motivation, and then inevitably we're going to say willpower and discipline, and they come with their own emotional baggage and their own implied judgment. And we really don't truly understand what these things are, except that people who don't exercise don't have them, which is nonsense, really. What they don't have, and this is critical, is they haven't found the time to work out internally what fitness means to them. What does it truly represent to be fit? Because if we don't have that emotional connection to what we want to achieve, then the intellectual capacity to link it to something, to some desirable goal, certainly exists, but is of limited value. And it is of limited shelf life. And we know this. Every January, gyms are packed. We go there with the best will in the world. So willpower is certainly there. Motivation is certainly there. The means to access these things is certainly there. And by March, mid-April at the latest, up to 75% of those individuals have dropped out. And of those who have remained, maybe 20% do maybe 2 or 3 times a week as opposed to every day. So when this happens, something fundamentally different is going on, which we need to understand. And that's where Built to Last comes in. And as you said, it helps you understand your motivation. Why do you want to get fit? And motivation from a neuroscientific point of view is essentially a neurochemical cocktail of neurotransmitters in our brain, which allow us to take an action, whatever that action may be. They will take us from a place where we feel uncomfortable to a place where we'll feel more comfortable. And in that transition, there's the release of inner pressure, that discomfort which we feel. And if we ascribe the correct value to where we are and where we're going, then we recalibrate the cost of getting there. So if we say that exercise is a stressor, is it going to be difficult for me? Absolutely, because you want changes to happen to your body, in which case you need to pressure yourself a little bit for those adaptations to take place. So it's not going to be an easy journey. Well, if your motivation is right, if you say, well, I like the way I am, or, excuse me, I kind of like where I'm going, but it's difficult because it doesn't mean that much to me internally, then the cost of the exercise is essentially an obstacle that forces people over time to drop out. But if they make the emotional connection, if they say, well, I understand where I want to get to, it has real value for me. I want to be alive and feeling great in my body 20 years from now. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to be able to enjoy life as I age and actually feel happy in my body, not have to worry about ill health, medicine, not being able to do the things I love, feeling trapped inside my own body, which is a terrible feeling. So if we have that emotional connection, then what happens in our brain, we recalibrate the cost of the exercise to ourselves, and that drops down a little bit and becomes more acceptable. And then we're more willing to essentially go through it in order to attain what we want.
Yeah, that so frequently it requires an intrinsic goal that is incredibly compelling and or running into a level of discomfort that is so uncomfortable the other thing becomes the obvious choice. And I often see this either with people who have had chronic pain, significant injuries, really big setbacks, or observed it in family members. I get this a lot where, a 40-year-old woman will call me up and say, my mom is 62 and essentially immobile. I don't want that to
Yes.
happen to me, and I'm afraid I'm on that road. And it took watching someone else have a catastrophe, being trapped in their life and realizing that this isn't inevitable, but is the road that they're on. That level of discomfort and terror is sometimes what it takes for people to make this shift, because it's not working out twice a week for 20 minutes and it's no big deal. It's that plus all of the other lifestyle shifts that come with it. It is becoming the kind of person who does these things that are uncomfortable for long-term benefits. And that's not easy.
Yes. No, it isn't. You're right. And those wake-up calls, like you just described, essentially recalibrate the emotionality. What it means to us to avoid something which will make us feel really, really bad. And then we are willing to undergo the harder thing of changing as many things as we can. And that's always difficult. And to be fair, it has to be an incremental process. If we try to change too many things, we have to change our lifestyle, we have to change our sleep patterns, we have to change our diet, we have to change how often we exercise and what kind of exercise we do. 100% we have to do all those things. But if we do all those things at once, it's a lot in terms of the energetic cost it imposes on us, both internally and externally. And then we have life on top of that. And life is really messy. We don't control anything. So we're going to get stressed. We're going to have a job crisis. We're going to have a family crisis. We're going to have a kid crisis, whatever it is. It's going to knock us off our path. And usually what happens then, we blame ourselves. We say, you're weak-willed, you can't do it. You guilt yourself. And we feel even worse. And then we stop exercising because we don't feel good about any of those things. And then we say, okay, we're really good at providing excuses for ourselves. We can say, well, I'm going to pick it up in a month or so, and that month never comes. Or I'm going to do something at home, and because we haven't structured this, it's even harder than going to a gym environment and accessing a professional who will help you actually structure what you're doing, and he understands all that. So by taking what seems to be a simpler solution sometimes, we create more obstacles for ourselves, and those obstacles trip us up. And then we end up with statistics which are really, really grim. The World Health Organization has predicted that 25 years from now, 2050, half the world's population is going to be obese or overweight. That's crazy. In developed countries, 35% of people exercise 3 times a week. That's nuts. Only 35%, which means 65% don't get enough exercise and 52% don't get any exercise at all. I mean, it's crazy. These are things we need to address. I mean, we live in a world where potentially we can live up to 90, 95 years old. It shouldn't be, as we age, that we are essentially trapped in a lifestyle and a body that's ill, doesn't feel good, and life itself doesn't feel good.
That, I think, is one of the most important points, and something that certainly as a coach keeps me going, is it's not, I don't get super excited. That's not true. Let me rephrase this. I'm a little bit indifferent to how much you can bench press. I'm really excited that you're making progress and that getting you stronger resonates through the rest of your life.
Yes.
If the only thing that happens is you win in the gym, but the rest of your life is not improving, and your energy and mood and feeling and confidence and the positive impact you have on the rest of society and your community, if all of that isn't going up, I don't think I'm doing my job.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I'm sorry I'm interrupting you here, but this is something which we don't talk about often. You can be externally very fit and actually unhealthy because you have a lot of stress, you are not regulating your emotions, you are not reacting correctly in other parts of your life because you are putting everything into the exteriority of you. And we see that sometimes at top level competitors. And certainly I know for myself, when I was competing at a very high level for 10 years, every day of my life in those 10 years, I'd wake up and I'd be tired and I'd have some kind of pain in some part of my body. And I'd still push myself to go for a run in the morning, come back, go to work, come back from work, go and train for 2 hours, come back, get something to eat, do a little bit of stretching and go to bed. And by then it'll be about midnight. Was I fit? Absolutely. I was really, really fit. Was I healthy? Well, I wasn't. And the only thing that kept me from going off the rails internally in my head was the fact that exercise in itself was a vent for me. And that was keeping me just on the straight and narrow. But this is just. So am I healthier now? Yes. Well, am I as fit? No, but I feel better. And that's great. So that it comes back to what you said. And I admire that.
It's that fitness, wellness, sickness continuum, right? Where
Yes.
people who aren't moving, essentially lethargic, immobile, not eating well, they're not doing great. But often the people who get held up, certainly the ones who are winning social media these days with extremely lean physiques or incredible performances, they also don't feel good and they're not healthy. And there are consequences for all of that, which most of them know and a number of them accept, including whatever, the highest level of athletes in the world are sore and hurt and not feeling great all the time. And there's a middle ground that most people need to find that is potentially less sexy, but it feels much better and it's sustainable. And it's something you can do for 20, 30, 40 years to different variations and continue to win and continue to make progress, as opposed to going from an 8-pack to a 10-pack, which is a huge amount of work for a potentially negligible reward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love the way you phrase this. It's exactly that. And we see almost every day in the news some social media influencer who's in the fitness world in terms of the pictures they put out, etc., having a burnout or having a health crisis. Because that level of peak fitness is unsustainable for the long term. And also it feeds into an unrealistic expectation in terms of what the average person can do. And certainly we need to address this, because a lot of people think that that's the way it should be. And that's a kind of prescribed fitness image, which is perpetuated by the pop culture and films and everything else, because it just feeds our idea of the extreme. For us, fitness is what you said. Feel good inside your body. Feel good when you move your body. Feel good when you do the things which you do in order to be able to move your body. And that makes it both sustainable, as you said, but also sustaining. It makes us feel good inside ourselves.
Yes, one of the questions I will often ask people is, are there things you want to do that you aren't able to do? And if they say no, I will say, well, what do you need me for then? If you can say yes to everything in your life and you're feeling okay, then what's wrong? You're winning. Keep doing whatever you're doing. You're killing it. And it's the people who say, well, actually, I want to be able to chase after my kid on a beach, or I can't play pickup basketball anymore, or I used to love running and I don't think I can run anymore because I gained weight or have joint pain or whatever. And they will often present it as a small thing. Like, oh, well, I used to run and I know it doesn't really matter, but I really liked running. But that expression of movement was a part of them feeling fit and strong and capable. And all of that fed into how they interact with the rest of the world in a positive or not positive way. And it's part of them. And I don't, ideally fitness shouldn't be your whole identity. But if you are unable to move and unable to do things you want to do, that can also become part of your identity.
Yes, absolutely. And I think addressing something really crucial here now, which again, most people don't unpack because it requires a little bit of internal work. Who we are, who we actually feel ourselves to be, is intimately tied to our physical capabilities, whether we acknowledge it or not. So if we can play tennis for an hour, if we can walk 5 miles without thinking about it, if we can just bend down, pick something up and put it on the table without a second thought, that's part of who we are. We fashion that image, which has a certain specific freedom of movement in the three-dimensional world we inhabit. And that's our identity. And usually what happens when things begin to go wrong, our identity begins to change, our mood begins to change, we don't feel so well. Our character changes. People say we become grumpy, we become short, we snap at people because we are not happy inside ourselves. We are controlling it, but at every provocation, every trigger, it sort of overflows and we can't control it, and we externalize it in sort of slightly antisocial behavior. So being able to address that and say, yeah, I want to be happier. How can I be happier? Well, in a world we cannot control, the only thing we can control is our body. And if we learn to control that, it gives us a sense of assurance, a sense of confidence, which then allows the general anxiety that the external world creates in us to be dampened down, so we're not stressed all the time. Without chronic stress, we have better interior health. Our gut health is better, our major organs are better, our body manages its energy reserves better so that we don't have excess fat deposits from the energy we consume. We can access the energy we need when we need it, and cortisol levels are not spiking at the slightest provocation. So fashioning that identity is so difficult when we don't understand what we're doing. And it's key to when it comes to exercising. I'm so glad you addressed that.
Thank you. We're kind of walking down two separate paths, which is the importance of introspection and mindset and kind of goal setting and finding your long-term why, and the importance of direct action. And I think for different people, either one might be the best first step. There are people who need to kind of look within and really unpack either why they would want to do this, or find a good reason, or fashion an important, compelling goal. And there are people who kind of just need to do it. I had a conversation with a client a couple of days ago, and they're very busy and they're very stressed and they have a lot going on, and they have been getting kind of sick all the time. I said, yeah, just go to the gym. It's fine. Like, I don't need you motivated. I don't need you to want to be there. I don't need you excited. I don't need you to have enough time. Show up and do as much as you can do and then go home. I will take a 4 out of 10. That's fine. But we just need to get in. We need some direct action, because there's someone who will spin in place until everything is exactly perfect, and shock and awe that never actually happens. For the first kind of people, the people who are looking within, how would you take someone by the hand and kind of help them find their goal? I want to be able to run 5 miles. I want to be able to show up for my grandkids this way. How does someone go about that kind of relatively challenging work?
Well, it's both easy to answer and difficult to do sometimes, but you start with what truly makes you happy. And internally we know. So if you say to yourself, you ask them, what is it that makes you happy? Is it when you run? Is it when you lift? Is it when you just feel generally capable? Is it when you have greater range of motion and you have this image in your head that, I can do all these things. You don't have to be the fastest person on the planet or the strongest, but you need to feel that capability, which you have in your head. And we know from the emotional response when it's the right thing for them. And they know themselves, because suddenly they feel like a pressure lifts and they think, okay, this is what I want to achieve. And then the next question is, well, what would it take? And then that's when, you begin to unpack the layers yourself and you say, how long do we have? How many times should we do this? How many times are we prepared to do that? And it begins to become something functional, which at the same time addresses their internal world. And then it begins to appear doable, and it gives them a sense of control. In everything we do, in any walk of life, in almost every human activity, the sense of control we have or we can create for ourselves is key to the success we will achieve and the internal stress and pressure we will feel. So if we feel we have very little control, I can come to you and I can say, Justin, I want you to make me fit. And you say, okay. And let's say I'm a really difficult customer. So you're going to say, okay, David, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that. And I'm entirely in your hands and I feel I have no sense of control. I don't understand what you're doing. I don't understand why you're doing it. I'm willing to give it a go, but you are stressing me out. You're making me feel powerless. And that is going to basically make me react in ways that will work against what you're trying to do. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'll say, Justin is no good. I did everything he asked me to do and it doesn't work. No, it was not even close, right? But that's my impression of it, because I don't have that control. But if you say, hey, David, what do you want to achieve? And I'll say, you know what? When I was 18, I used to be able to run 5 miles and now I don't even get close to one. Is it possible to get back to that? And you're going to say, well, would it make you happier? Truly. If I have half an idea of what I want, I'll say, yeah, probably. I feel so much better about me. And then I'm halfway there already. You're going to say, okay, this is what we need to do. And you're going to lay out a realistic plan where it will gradually increase my capability to run better and make it easier. And within that, I will bloom and you'll be happy and I'll be happy as well.
And that's empowering you and educating you, and also giving you the tools to do what you just described, which is reverse engineering from big, scary goals. I want to be able to do this thing I used to do, and I am not even sure it's possible anymore. Well, that's terrifying. And despite the infinite information surrounding us, people don't know where to start and don't know where to look. Like, what's step one? So we get that big,
Yes.
scary goal and start reversing from that. Okay, well, someone who could run 5 miles, they would probably run 4 miles a little bit before that, and three, and two, and one, and half a mile. And okay, if someone was to get better, well, how would we do it? Okay, well, we'd probably have to address the joints and musculature and stability and make sure that that is good. If we're going to quadruple what you're doing, we need to make you strong enough. Okay, and now you can start building all of these little pieces, and suddenly you're doing some single leg strength work and making sure your calves are pretty resilient and a little bit of jogging and speed work. And now it's 30 minutes of digestible work that is one brick in this amazing structure we're creating. And at the top is what seems like an impossible goal, but now it's just walking up a staircase, which won't always be easy, and you're going to fall down a couple times. But it now there's a digestible, understandable path towards something really difficult.
Yes, and the magic of it is that at the same time as we're going through this process, internally that person is changing. They're becoming more assured. They're becoming less anxious. They feel empowered, as you said, more in control of their life. They're willing to do more. They look at what other changes can they make. Perhaps they can look at their diet. Perhaps they can look at their sleep patterns. Perhaps their hydration is not right. Perhaps, any substance abuse like alcohol or tobacco or anything which we use as a coping mechanism needs to be looked at. So these things, which are in themselves huge subjects to tackle, now become incrementally easier to address. So through that structured approach, a lot of other sort of change under place.
You, on that note, you strike me as someone who would be good at talking about this. Sometimes when you lay that approach out to people, they get really frustrated because they realize how long it's going to take. You say, well, what we're going to do, okay, you want to lose X weight and look like this and be able to play pickup basketball. Okay, we're going to track your water and your steps for 3 weeks, and you're going to do some body weight workouts a couple times a week. That's where we're starting. And 3 weeks in, they're incredibly frustrated that they're not down 30 pounds and playing pickup basketball. And I will always try and set expectations for where we're going to go. I don't want anyone to be surprised by how long it takes. How would you speak to someone who is looking at a road that they just realized is probably going to be a 9 to 18 month journey and not the 21-day fix that they were hoping for, that this is the right way to go?
I blame Rocky films, right? In 15 minutes of film time, we see a
Just give me a
tremendous
montage. Put me in a montage, coach. That's all I
yes,
need.
physical transformation takes place. Well, that's a great question, and managing expectations in a realistic manner is important. We can always say to somebody, listen, if you want to look like a super athlete, okay, it's easy, but the work to do that is tremendous. It's going to crush you. I mean, how people look when they compete in elite sports is the result of the work they do. It's almost a byproduct of what they actually do because it's performance orientated. And for the average person who this is not their job, it's not their life, it's not realistic. It's like saying to somebody, okay, the Olympics tomorrow. You say, what? How? So we explain that what they're going to go through is a stressor in itself. And in order to deal with that stressor, we have to make it as easy as possible to actually perform, which means that the energetic load it has to put on us has to be manageable because it's an extra stress. So once they realize that, they're more willing to work with you. They're more willing to manage their expectations because certainly they begin to understand that it's not going to be easy. And within a relatively short time frame of maybe 6 to 12, their internal neurochemical makeup begins to change. The reward system works a little bit differently. They feel better about their capabilities. Usually, and I do that with all my friends, I change the metrics. I say, don't look at your weight. That's the wrong metric to use. Don't look at whether, you can pump your muscles up in front of the mirror and have them got bigger. Look at the way you feel, look at the way you move, look at the way your clothes fit you, look at how you perform in your daily life. Do you finish the day and you still have energy in your tank? Can you go out with your kids and play all weekend without actually feeling exhausted? These are the best markers of what you're actually achieving. And then everything else will come gradually as a byproduct of these very basic fundamental blocks which are being put in place. And once they actually begin to feel that way, they definitely get the message. Then they're beginning to work a lot better with the time frame.
I do the same thing. I can't remember the last time I tracked weight or even like body weight measurements or anything like that with people because I kept running into the why. I kept running into someone would say, I need to lose 25 pounds. Like, okay, how come? Oh, well, for my health. Okay, what about your health isn't good? My doctor said these blood markers have to change. Okay, cool. So we want to change blood markers. Yes. Okay, cool. If you didn't lose a pound and your blood work was amazing, would that be acceptable? And now they have to look within. Like, well, actually, I want to change the way I look too. Great. I'm on board. So blood markers and body composition. If you fit into these pants and your blood work was great, but you didn't lose a pound, would that be okay? And you can walk them down the road of like, actually, I'm actually pretty indifferent to the number on the scale for most people. What I want is these other bigger things. And the way I've been taught to express it is I need to lose some weight, which losing weight may well be a part of this journey. It's entirely possible. But if we're, especially with weight, where it's fluctuating, hour to hour for most people, if that's our measure of success, it's going to be limited. If that's our only measure of success, I would much rather have someone who feels great in their clothes and their blood work is amazing and they can, go outside and do all the activities they want to do, couldn't care less what that person weighs on a scale. That is a happy, healthy person who's going to be able to show up the way they want to show up most of the time.
Definitely. And that's so much better for our mental health, because when we chase these superficial metrics, first of all, they're really hard to get right very quickly. And secondly, as you said, they fluctuate for some people, day to day. I mean, if you look at men and women, for instance, the differences at these sort of superficial metrics is significant from day to day sometimes. And certainly during the hormonal cycle, there are other changes taking place in the body. And for women, it can be devastating. They feel they're failing, and that destroys their internal world. And then sometimes for men, if they don't see themselves pumped up after about a week of exercise, they think, oh, I'm never going to get there. Maybe the trainer is doing it wrong. They never think that the process takes time. So by refocusing their attention on their interiority, how they feel, how they move, how they function, and then how that relates to the external world around them, around them, which they inhabit, that definitely changes the reward system in their brain. It changes the pathway for them.
We've talked a lot or several times about exercise as a stressor, which I think is really important and often gets overlooked. People will talk about exercise being a stress relief for them. And in some ways it is, but it is also intentional stress. We feel strong. We often use the model of load versus capacity, which is your capacity is shifting day to day. If you slept amazing and your nutrition is on point and your relationships are cool and work feels really excellent, you have a lot of room in your cup. We could fill that up with exercise, fill that up with managed intentional stress and get a huge result. 2 days later, you might have slept terribly, had a fight with someone you love, your nutrition is completely off the rails, your mind is on 3 work projects, and we have, a quarter of an inch to fill that cup up, and we need to be really careful. How do you think about the intentionality of exercise as a stressor and why it's still useful to add stress in such a stressful world?
Well, okay, that's one excellent question. This is, and we need to unpack so many layers of it. Okay, let's go back. Excuse me. Let's go back 10,000 years from now. So in that world we lived in then, every day was stressful, physically and mentally. Mentally, there are a lot of unknowns, and we have very little control. Everything wants to kill us. And physically, everything we did, we had to run, climb, lift things, dig. It was our daily life. We didn't think that was exercise. That was just our everyday sort of reality. And our body adapted and our mind adapted for that. And we know from anthropologists who have been embedded in the few remaining hunter-gatherer societies which are still removed from civilization in this world. And they're the closest thing we have to the Paleolithic age. And we know that they actually do exactly those things. Their diet is on point because they eat just enough to survive because there's no surplus. So they're fairly lean. They have to walk large distances for their food. And in order to do what they have to do, they have to cut their way through bushes, they have to lift things and climb. And when they don't have to do those things, what do? Nothing, zero. We don't see them going to lift rocks to get bigger muscles to swing the machete a little bit faster, because they're disinclined to do that. They're disinclined to do that naturally because their brain and our brain has the exact same mechanism that says, okay, if there's a stressor coming your way, you want to avoid it. And if there's exercise which you don't have to do, you want to avoid that as well, because this is how you conserve energy, and that's how your survival long term is actually ensured. Our brain doesn't know that we live in a world where you and I can spend 10 hours in front of a screen, and we have access to a refrigerator 15 steps away that has 10,000 calories in it. It doesn't know that. What it knows is that we get tired in the screen because our brain uses ATP, just like our muscles, and ATP is short for adenosine triphosphate, and that's the fuel that every cell in our body uses. And if we get stressed, if we have an argument with somebody, if we're thinking about tax return, if we're dealing with a crisis which requires mental work, we're using up that energy, which is, again, capacity versus load. So we have then a lot less capacity for the load of exercise, and we tend to feel that voice in our head. And I feel it. I've trained all my life. I finished the day. I have a gym at home since 2019, which is the pandemic, and it's like 20 steps away. And when I put my laptop lid down, the voice in my head says, it was a stressful day, still have some emails to go through. Why don't you just put it off today? Train twice as hard tomorrow, which we know it will not happen. I know it won't happen. And if it did, then I know that the next day I won't be able to train as hard because I really pushed myself in this one session. So it breaks my pattern of training sustainably every day. So that voice in my head, and I have to get around it. So how do we do that? How do we address this problem? Okay, first of all, we need to understand that we need to put our body through some kind of stress in order to give us the adaptations that we need. We know that consistency always beats intensity, and there have been studies on that. There are people they did studies on people who trained intensively 3 times a week, and people who trained not so intensively 5 times a week, and they both exhibited approximately the same amount of growth when it comes to muscles. But in terms of overall fitness and strength, those who trained 5 times a week with less intensity had slightly greater performance markers. And this is ascribed to the signal we send to our body. The signal we send to our brain. Our body is put under stress, our signal goes to the brain says, okay, what does the body need? Because it doesn't know we're exercising. We're substituting exercise for a lifestyle we no longer have. So it says, okay, you need to, whatever you're doing. If you're lifting, you need stronger muscles. If you're running, you need greater capillary action in your lungs and throughout your body and the muscles of the legs, which basically power your movement. If you're doing some kind of range of motion movement, you need sort of a greater mobility in your joints, in your tendons. So all those things, in order to build, require an energetic cost the body has to invest in. Which means the brain now has to prioritize that because it thinks from its perspective that it's necessary for our survival. So it's almost that simplicity in the logic. In order for us to send that persistent signal which says, hey, you know what, those muscles which I need to build, I want them now. Okay, in order for the brain to understand that, we need to be persistent. And in order to be persistent, we need to be consistent. We need to send a signal that says, you know what, I'm lifting today and I lifted yesterday and I lifted the day before. Different kinds of lift, right? Different kinds of activation of the movement of the muscles. And with varying intensity, so we don't exhaust ourselves from a neurological or a sort of hormonal point of view, and certainly we don't damage ourselves, so it requires greater recovery time. And if we do this right, then the signal goes out and we begin to build ourselves up. So that's why we need that stressor. And now to address the fact that we avoid it and how we get around that. And I have 2 strategies from my own sort of personal experience. This is what I do for myself. I make a deal with myself. I always say, okay, I'm going to go and train for 10 minutes. It's going to be on the clock. And if on 10-minute mark, if I still feel the way I do, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to take those 10 minutes and I'll consider it a win. And this is what always happens. And there's a reason why this happens. After 10 minutes, my mood has changed. My muscles are warmer. My blood hormones are elevated. My dopamine and serotonin are flowing through my system. Endocannabinoids are going through my bloodstream. I feel pretty good about what I'm doing. And then I continue doing it for about an hour or an hour and a half. And this is what we know from very current studies. We know that muscles that run or for up to about 10 minutes, and usually the window is between 8 and 10 minutes of activity, they secrete a particular hormone, which then activates the reward system in the brain, which produces serotonin and dopamine. And that immediately affects the neurochemical basis of our motivation. So then we're inclined to continue doing what we're doing. And again, there's an ancient logic to this now, because in the past, we tended to be active like this for an 8 to 10 or 15 or 20 sort of minute window when we were either running to get our food, or we're being physically active to get our food, or we're trying to avoid becoming food. And in those two situations, what happens? We work out for about 8 or 10 minutes and we're tired. The body sends a signal to the brain. It says, muscles are fatiguing. It's the sort of fueling cycle in our body is becoming a little bit harder. We're exhausting our blood sugar levels. And the brain usually would say, hey, stop and take a break. But if you stop and take a break, you don't catch your food, so you're going to starve. Or whatever's chasing you is going to get its food and you're going to die. So the survival mechanism there will not work. So then the brain has worked out this strategy where it says, oh, you've been working out for 8 or 10 minutes, and it's not working out. You're being physically active for 8 or 10 minutes. Obviously, it's important. So I'm going to help you now to continue doing this. It produces these specific type of hormones through the muscles, which affect the brain. And then the reward system changes, and the attention we pay to the signals that the body sends that mark fatigue become dampened. So we don't feel as fatigued as before. So we are then inclined to continue. So this is what I do. Even though, I know the science behind it because the studies are recent. Ever since I've applied it, it always works. And I know I'm kidding myself, right? Every time, but I'm thinking, how stupid am I? I know all this and I still feel this reticence to exercise. I still have to make this 10-minute deal, thinking, okay, today, and because my brain tells me, well, it's exceptionally tiring day. And it isn't. It's just as tiring as any other day, but it tells me this message and I'm willing to accept it. So I say, okay, 10 minutes. I'm going to work out for 10 minutes. And that, if it's a bust, it's going to be a 10-minute workout. And then it changes every time. So that's what I do. Now, the other strategy I have is I've made it as easy as possible for myself to exercise. Before the pandemic, I would have to get dressed, grab my gear, go to the gym, get undressed, get dressed in my gym kit, work out, and then repeat the process to get home. And then normally I'd have to negotiate weather and traffic. A lot of obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I removed all those. So now, the gym is there. It's so easy to do. I just have to walk from where I'm sitting to where I'm going to work out. I don't even have to change clothes most times. It's going to go in the wash, depending on what I'm going to do. So I made it as consciously as easy for myself to do that, so that the excuses are not there. And I have a fully equipped gym, which I don't really need, because at the end of the day, all I need is 1 square meter of space, and I can work out with body exercises or a couple of dumbbells. But by having all that equipment, sometimes when I'm tired, I don't have to work out what to do. I'm tired, I'm going to get on a treadmill, I'm going to jog for an hour, or perhaps walk for an hour for 90 minutes, watch a Netflix movie while I'm doing it. I'm still exercising, and my brain is almost on autopilot. So the excuses of this is hard have now gone. And without those excuses, the cost to me has lowered significantly, and that makes it easy for me. And that's a strategy. Strategy is trick yourself, make that 10-minute deal, and certainly make it really easy to get to where you need to in order to exercise.
I couldn't agree more. Knocking down those barriers, which is often my answer where people say, well, what should I look for in a gym? My first answer is one you can get to. What's close? What's easy? What's on the way to work or on the way home from work? But they have this brand of equipment. I don't care. I don't that is so far down the road of discussion. Like a place you will show up at. And then first of all, I trick myself all the time in the same strategy. And my go-to for a lot of people is walk through the doors, get on a treadmill, walk for 5 minutes. If you still don't want to be there, you can go home. Walk in, get on the treadmill for 5 minutes. If after 5 minutes you still don't want to be there, go home, let me know. It's totally cool. And that is enough time for the act of showing up and getting there, which is 85% of the battle. And then they're in their clothes and they're moving and they're breathing a little bit and their temperature is rising and they're in an environment where fitness is happening. And that's usually more than enough that they're getting all of those rewards. And now it's the easiest thing is to stay there and do the next 4 to 6 movements that are programmed and not coming back from that. You mentioned this idea of exercise as a stressor and how important it is. And there's sometimes a tension people feel between what we talked about of making it easy, taking these barriers down, making it super simple, and the fact that the exercise and movement needs to be challenging. It needs to be kind of irritating enough to create that adaptation, especially in a world where we aren't being chased most of the time to be eaten. We don't have to go hunt for our own food. I can press a button on my phone and a very nice person will just show up at my front door with all kinds of amazing food. I sometimes think of exercise as the foundry for the rest of your life. Wouldn't it be cool if the training was actually the hardest part of your day? Certainly physically, sometimes mentally. This is a place where we can carefully, intentionally, safely put you in some really challenging positions or under challenging load or ask difficult things of you, including showing up and doing this consistently. If you can do this, this is the foundry in which we are forging a person who is healthy and happy and capable and an amazing community member and a great father and can show up for society the way they want to. We have the capability of doing this in this environment where we can control so many elements and it's built to significantly challenge you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought this up. As an aside, I've been looking a lot at, because of where I live most of the time in the year these days, ancient history, and I've been looking at Sparta and its warrior culture. And this is thing which stuck with me. Spartans used to train, essentially fashioned, structured an entire society to help them become the ultimate elite warrior of their time, and they succeeded. And their training was so hard that when they went off to do any kind of battle, any kind of war, it was almost like a break from training for them. It would feel a lot less arduous, a lot less stressful. And this came through in their attitude when they were on the battlefield. And most of the times, all they had to do was show up. They would show up, start getting ready, and then somebody would come out with some kind of flag, and we say, why don't we talk about this before we start charging at each other? Which made me smile because I thought, that's quite an achievement because to be able to do that. And this is exactly what you're talking about. Essentially, when we put ourselves through a physical stressor, the brain doesn't have redundant circuits that deal with physical stress and mental stress. What you have to do in terms of moving your body and doing something complex which is going to push you, and a crisis in your life where you have to deal with the stress, anxiety, and make a critical decision. So it's what you said. You're essentially creating a foundry, fashioning a better person by going through that. So certainly there's a place for that, and there's a time for that. And when you do that, when you do that, the effects are significant, both inside and outside the person. So the brain senses that there's a stressful situation. It wants the body to get out of it. And you tell it, no, I'm going to stay through it. I'm going to do these 5, 6, 8 reps, movements, or whatever it is, for however long I have to do that, because I understand what it's going to give me physically. But at the same time, the willpower, and I'm a little bit reticent to use that word, but let's say the inclination to undertake that stressor willingly and put somebody through it, yourself, put yourself through it and get through to the other side, then hardens the neural circuitry in the brain, which reacts when we feel stress. And this is what happens. Because it's hardened, basically it's been through a stressful experience, when we meet a stress which is non-physical, it's mental. We have to deal with something which has to happen. We have to take a critical decision. A lot of things go wrong. We have to find somehow a path or navigate our way through them so we can fix them. The brain then has the capacity to deal with that. And because it has the capacity to deal with that, it doesn't panic. Because panic is a sensation where the body and the brain feel they're under threat. The brain then tries to help the body survive by shutting down the critical parts of the brain which we require for analysis and higher level thought. And it shuts them down because they're energetically expensive. And a panicked brain thinks, oh no, but fuel the muscles, pump the heart, bring up the blood pressure, raise the temperature, because this person needs to act. And obviously there's nothing to act. We have to make a decision and we can't see our way through it. we have that kind of mental fog where everything is blocked. But if we have the capacity to deal with that stressor because we have experienced it before in a different format, i.e. the physical exercise that has been put through, when we then experience the similar kind of pressure mentally, the brain is better able to deal with it, decompress it, control it, regulate our emotions, don't go into panic mode. And then suddenly, looking at the same facts in front of us, we can see ways to handle them way better than before, simply because we have access to those higher centers of the brain, which carry out analytical thinking, bring in our knowledge and skills and memory from other areas of our life, so we can find the solutions that we need. So yeah, I mean, what you said is brilliant. It's exactly that. Forge your body, you forge your mind. And if you forge your body and mind, you're basically remaking yourself.
And the fact is, you are going to run into very stressful situations. Things are going to happen. You are going to get injured. There are going to be catastrophes in life. There are going to be major setbacks. There's going to be tragedy. These things are coming. Far better to prepare for it. And we're not simulating, panic. We're not trying not to simulate panic or tragedy or anything like that, but simulate that kind of stress level so you get better and better and better, and frankly, more resilient. So when you get knocked down, it's easier to get back up. This is
Yes.
sometimes a discussion I have with people, especially women of a certain generation who have kind of been taught that they're not supposed to lift heavy. They're not supposed to go super hard. They shouldn't be pouring with sweat. To some degree, they've been told that they shouldn't go too hard because they're going to get hurt or something else is going to happen with them. And the exact opposite is true. We need to go pretty stinking hard in a thoughtful, safe, controlled environment, or you will not be resilient enough to deal with what's coming. And suddenly your longevity has been stolen from you.
Absolutely. I love what you said. Yeah. And then, of course, these misconceptions still exist in our time. I mean, not too long ago, they thought that women who'd run more than more than a mile would lose their uterus because it would drop out. So, I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Me.
Which never happened. Like they
No,
just made it
exactly.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing about misinformation. It kind of sounds like, oh, scary and maybe plausible, and we know it isn't, and there's no factual basis for it. So by addressing things as you do, in a structured, logical way, where you explain the foundation of the body, what it does, why it does it, what effect it'll have, and then how it'll affect the mind. And then that becomes the evidential basis for the person to accept the truth you're giving them. I think that's a brilliant way of doing it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. David, this has been a tremendous joy. Where
For
people
me
are going
too.
to want to reach out and find more about you and read some of your books, where should they go? Send people wherever you want to send them so they can find more about David.
Thank you. Well, you can find my books on Amazon. If you look for Build to Last, it's on Amazon. It's on pretty much every online bookshop. It's also in bookshops. If you're supporting your local bookshops and you order it through bookshop.org, then you're doing something good with your money for the community you live in. I'm 100% behind that. And you'll find me at davidamerland.com. If you Google me, my socials come up. I'm pretty active on most platforms. I share a lot of insights I come across because it excites me when I do. And, I don't hold anything back. You're welcome to access all that.
David, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the Feel Strong podcast.
Thank you for having me. This has been brilliant.
Thank you so much.